Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on into the Rooted Podcast, brought to you by our awesome friends over at Green Bros. Tim Strombel coming to you from our Rooted Podcast facility right here in beautiful Denver, Colorado. Thanks for tuning in, as always, be it on iTunes, SoundCloud, or the host website, stayrooted.com. Do us a quick favor while you're listening to this. Leave us a review on the podcast so we can continue to grow, add more funding to the show, and make a ton more content for you. Your opinion matters, and we want to hear it. Also, don't forget to check out Rooted TV, which just launched on High Times TV. Our latest episode just went up on there as of yesterday, so by the time you hear this, it'll certainly be up. We think it's one of our best yet. Big thanks, by the way, to the folks over at High Times TV, as well as our awesome buddies over at Cannabis Club TV and Harvest TV. In fact, our next show will feature Danny Keith, CEO of Cannabis Club TV. We have a ton to talk about, including some really cool announcements you'll want to tune in for. We'll also preview two huge upcoming podcast guests that will be flying specifically out to LA to interview. We'll let you know those celebrity names on our next show, so make sure you're paying attention again next week, so stay tuned. As for this show, we're really excited about the show today. We're going to be talking with Peter Vogel, the co-founder and CEO of Leafwire, a company that's connecting investors to cannabis. It's been a big problem in the industry the last handful of years, getting the right investors to the right cannabis companies. This platform is looking to attack that problem. Think LinkedIn for cannabis professionals. Okay, we'll talk more about that comparison in just a minute. Peter is a serial entrepreneur, having co-founded several companies in the financial tech and loyalty space, who then jumped headfirst into the cannabis space a year ago and co-founded Leafwire. So, why does the cannabis industry need a platform like Leafwire? Why should you already be on this platform if you're not already? And what role are social networks playing in the cannabis professional space? We'll answer those questions and more in just a moment. But first, a quick shout out to our awesome sponsor, Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. From small scale cultivations to commercial grows, Green Bros dry trimmers, trichome extractors, destemmers, sorters, precision batchers, rosin presses, the box. All of those machines want to save you time, money, and labor. Check them out, greenbros.com, or call 844-DRY-TRIM to schedule a free demo in your area today. That's 844-DRY-TRIM. You can also catch Green Bros at the NECANN Boston Convention, March 22nd to 24th, LIFT in Toronto, June 6th to 9th, NCIA San Jose, July 22nd to 24th, and of course, MJ BizCon Vegas in December. So make plans if you're in the area to see the Green Bros booth. They got some really cool stuff going on over there. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome in our guest for this afternoon. Again, his name is Peter Vogel, the co-founder and CEO of Leafwire. They are connecting investors to cannabis. You can check them out, leafwire.com. We will, of course, link the website in the description of the podcast below, so no worries there. Peter, how are you this afternoon, buddy? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, awesome. Doing great. Thanks a lot for having me on.
I'm excited to talk to you, man. I've heard about Leafwire. I heard about you guys months ago, and I've checked out the platform a couple of times. I'm officially on the platform now. Leafwire is like LinkedIn, except 100% dedicated to the cannabis space. So right off the bat, I got to tell people you can connect with professionals, send messages, job search. Basically anything you can do on LinkedIn, you can do on Leafwire. So before we dive in, why? Why are we creating this technology? What problem are you looking to address by creating Leafwire?
So we're looking to solve a couple of different problems. The very first one that we approached was funding in cannabis. And the reality is cannabis is an immature industry compared to tech and other industries. So there's not the same built up infrastructure to help entrepreneurs. There's not as many meetings. There's not as many mentors. There's not as many events. So there's not all of the resources out there that's naturally helping people raise money. And the second part is that a lot of the entrepreneurs in cannabis are first-time entrepreneurs. They haven't raised money before, so they don't already have, 100 investor contacts who are jumping at the bit to make an investment. So you have a combination of an industry that's pretty young, and then you have a group of entrepreneurs who hasn't raised money before, and then you add in a third component, which is the regulatory environment. A lot of people are afraid to invest in cannabis, or in certain states aren't allowed to. So there's less money and there's a group of entrepreneurs that aren't quite as experienced in knowing how to get that money. So that was the first challenge that we decided to tackle.
Now, you're someone who's an expert in the social space. Marketing is your background, raising funds, entrepreneurship, all of that stuff. To a lot of people in the cannabis space, the social network title can be a four-letter word, and oftentimes they're as unpredictable as any part of the industry, mainly due to the continued federal prohibition of cannabis, which means at any time on most of these accounts you can get shut down just for cannabis activities. I guess first question is, when it comes to the instability of these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube deleting accounts, I haven't seen as much on LinkedIn, but I'm curious, all these social networks banning content or shutting down pages, what sort of impact is that having on how these businesses are operating and looking to build brands and raise funding?
Right. I would say it has a huge impact. I would say it makes it very difficult for a lot of brands out there to reach not only consumers, but to reach other companies and partners they want to do business with. And you mentioned a few of the examples, but we know lots of people who have YouTube channels that strictly talk about growing cannabis or strictly talk about something having to do with the business of cannabis, and they still get shut down. They're not talking about it as a drug. They're not talking about it as like a stoner talking about different strains or anything. They're just talking about the business of cannabis, and they still get shut down. So even the B2B efforts often get quashed by people like YouTube or Google or Facebook. You are right, though. On LinkedIn, it doesn't seem like they're quite as strict. Like we've seen a lot more sharing on LinkedIn. One of the things, though, we know is true, and people have told us this, not everybody wants to be loud about everything they do in cannabis on LinkedIn, because they may have a lot of family who don't understand it. They may be in a state where it's not fully legal. They may have other colleagues around the country that are in illegal states, or due to religious or whatever reasons, don't completely understand it. So the whole point of having a platform like Leafwire is to have somewhere where it's 100% supportive of cannabis and hemp as well. We have a lot of people on there growing hemp, selling hemp, having CBD products, et cetera. So it's not just cannabis type businesses. But we really thought it was important to have a place where people could really do all parts of the business of cannabis and not worry about judgment, not worry about getting shut down, not worry about any of the stigma that you still do have in lots of other places. And we think you're going to have for a couple more years at least. I mean, even when the laws change, there's still going to be stigma about people who, are still think there's something wrong with it. We'll still be judgmental about it. So Leafwire provides that ability to do everything from, you mentioned some of the examples earlier. Actually, you did such a good job. I think I should take you on some sales calls with us. But finding employees, finding business partners, and connecting with investors, just connecting with your peers, learning about cannabis events. I mean, it's the one place where you can go, and if you promote a cannabis event, everyone on the platform is at least interested. They may not be in the right city or state to attend, but it matters to them. If you go promote that same job or event on LinkedIn, a big percentage of people are not interested. So it's just not as focused. It's not as easy to get your message across. And there's a lot of people that don't care or actually think negatively about you for promoting an event.
So Peter, where did the name Leafwire come from?
So the company originally, when the first iteration of it was going to be a little more of like a PR newswire type site, promoting cannabis to different media outlets, different stories, just like PR newswire does. And it slowly morphed into more as the need for help with funding kind of became a bigger and bigger thing. It was morphed into that concept of now we want to be a platform where people can do business, meet investors, et cetera. And so we decided to keep the name Leafwire, Leaf obviously for the reasons, wire, because wire still had financial connotations, of wiring people money. And we do still have, we have a news feed that runs down the center of the platform, just like LinkedIn. So, I mean, it does make sense that we are a place where people share news, they share events, they announce new products, they promote jobs. So we are kind of a sense of like a news media outlet as well.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that interviewing all the entrepreneurs I have, the amount of agility you need early on, especially in the cannabis space, and being able to kind of react and play with what the market wants. And a lot of times these companies that I've talked to have started in one vertical and then end up kind of hopping over to fill a niche that the initial company could have probably filled, but that wasn't their goal. So instead they jump over, and then now they burst into this open lands and start having a lot of success. What I find really interesting with these networks, with these social platforms, with connecting people, is it seems like it's a chicken or the egg situation where you have to get people on the platform in order for them to get engaged, but people won't come on the platform unless there's people already on the platform. So how have you dealt with that and really just getting traffic and people to get into Leafwire out of the gate?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question, and you're 100% right. I've actually been involved with a few different types of networks and loyalty programs over the years, and the biggest challenge is you got to get enough people involved so that it works for them. They have people to communicate with, they have people to engage with. We launched with some events where we did some Shark Tank like events, pitch contests. We did them in Denver, LA, Oakland, Miami. We even did one in Vancouver. And we had usually 100, 150 people at all these events. A lot of those people joined. It created this great kind of energy and vibe. And I think those events in the beginning, the first couple months, really helped us get a foothold. And we just crossed actually 5,000 members this month in January. And we grew. So we've been live for about 4 or 5 months. December was our fastest month. We grew to 1,000 members. This month, we're already up to, I think it's like 1,650. So we're going to get almost a 17,500 members this month alone. So that'll cross the 6,000 barrier, and we'll get to 10,000 by April. And these are all cannabis professionals or investors. We've been very careful. We only promote ourselves on B2B type platforms. So things like Ganjapreneur, Marijuana Business Daily, Cannabis Business Executive, Cannabis Business Times, places like that have these are real business people that are running cannabis businesses. So we're not trying to attract just business cannabis consumers. We're trying very hard to be the LinkedIn of cannabis. Not like a Facebook.
Peter, throughout our 3 years or so, I mean, we've talked to entrepreneurs in the industry who have been around their whole lives. Some of them are brand new into the space. You've been in the space for around a year, which means that you spent years outside of it, I'm sure paying attention to it in some respect. What did you think about how the industry was evolving before you started to jump in? Those years where you saw it happening in Colorado, you said you've been living out here for a while. What were your thoughts on the evolution of the industry before you jumped in?
So I was always somewhat of a casual user of cannabis, not very consistent or very heavily, but always somewhat engaged. And I always had some friends who were in the industry. So I always thought of it as a kind of wild, wild west, new, exciting, huge opportunity type business. And, I've been here since, 2007. So through, a lot of the medical, through a lot of recreational just getting started. So I've been reading, obviously it was in the news all the time. The Denver Post hired Ricardo Baca as their first cannabis journalist in the United States ever. The Cannabis was here, so you couldn't really miss it living here. So I was definitely very aware of it, and I knew how exciting it was. And about a year and a half ago, I got approached by Marion Mariah Thayson is the CEO of Simplifia here in Denver. It's a compliance company. And he and I were both CEOs of tech companies a decade ago and got to be friends. We were in the same industry and have just been networking. And about a year and a half ago, we had lunch, and he explained that he had taken on this CEO role at Simplifia. He was telling me he had these great partners that he's creating some of these other businesses with, and they had this idea for Leafwire. And it convinced me to jump ship from my tech world job and jump headfirst into cannabis.
Yeah, we actually had Marion, excuse me, on the show back. I mean, man, it must have been a
Really?
year and a half, 2 years ago.
Cool.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
Simplify was a little bit earlier.
yeah, he's a really experienced entrepreneur. You know, he used to own a tequila company. He owned a loyalty company. I was in the loyalty business and was running a company at the same time he was. So we got to be friends, stayed in touch, and I'm actually in the offices. I'm in the same offices with Simplify here as well.
Exciting stuff, man.
This.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur. I led off the show talking about that. You've developed several companies in your past. I guess I want to know why cannabis and why now? I mean, you're a guy who could have jumped in at any point. This opportunity comes to you. And why did you decide to make the move when you did?
Partly because the group of people I was getting involved with. So Marion being one of them. Another investor named Alan Bankier, who's a longtime cannabis investor. He's on the board of New Frontier Data. He's on the board of 1906. Was on the board of EBU that just had a big liquidity event. So he's been around for many, many years. And also some of the first investors in Leafwire were Brian Vicente and Christian Cederberg. As part of the law from Vicente Cederberg. Who were some of the guys that wrote, Amendment 64 back in 2012. So, I mean, I think the real reason I made the leap is that I felt that even though I didn't know anything about the cannabis industry, I was joining a group of people and investors who were the real kind of cannabis veterans who could actually give me guidance and provide me with a little bit of kind of that cannabis street cred, I guess, that I don't have because I've been in for a year. But that whole team I mentioned has been great, getting us introductions, helping us find investors, kind of help guiding us through the cannabis world. So that was really it. It was the people involved that made me do it.
One of the things I'm really curious about, and I don't think I've gotten the chance to ask it enough to my interviewees, is the term serial entrepreneur and someone like yourself who has started and run a bunch of different companies. Do you just get tired after a while working in the same company and decide to move on and go do you have company ADD where all of a sudden you get this idea and you need to go pursue it? Because I feel like the beginning part, launching the company and growing it to where it's sustainable enough to where you can exit, that's the most stressful part. So why do you want to keep doing that over and over and over again?
Sometimes it's just the situation that, and it's funny when someone says they're a serial entrepreneur, all that means is that they've definitely failed at companies and succeeded at companies. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've had, success all along the way. I mean, a lot of the reason you do move on, some business you're working on may not work out. It may run out of money. It may not be a good product market fit. Or on the other side of the coin, and I've had this happen as well, your company gets acquired by someone else. And so it's a natural time to move on. You have some sort of liquidity event, and you may or may not even have the opportunity to stay. So I think a lot of times it's not just a sense of, I'm tired after 2 or 3 years. It's a situation of things that work out great. Sometimes they don't work out. New opportunities also just pop up that are too good to pass up. Like this, for example, this opportunity was too big. The people were too experienced, and I was part of a tech startup in San Diego called Empire, EMPYR, that was a tech startup in San Diego that had raised $50 million already, was growing, but I still didn't see the same potential in that as I did with Leafwire. So it's just a question of, where you see the future. I think what I thought to myself is, in 5 years from now, what do I want to be an expert at and most experienced in? And I thought being involved with cannabis fundraising, cannabis entrepreneurship, cannabis startups in 5 years is going to be a huge, valuable place to be versus just staying in the same tech world that I've been in for 20 years.
And I heard from a couple entrepreneurs I've interviewed something like 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10. If you can be getting that kind of percentage in your ventures, then you're hitting home runs and you're a successful entrepreneur. Because the odds of launching companies and having long-term success can be small, but if you can hit a couple out of the park, that's success.
Totally. And, most venture capitalist firms, I think it's 1 out of 6 that they aim for, 1 out of 6 to be successful. And they're going to make 10 or 20x their money on that 1 out of 6. And they lose money on the other 5, but it doesn't matter because they made 10 to 20x times their money on that 1 out of 6. So I don't know what the stat is for startup founders, but I've heard that from investors as well.
Are there any sort of legality issues you have in terms of navigating this, being a social networking platform? I mean, to compound onto that, you're trying to connect money to people who need money, and it is still a federally illegal thing. Now, you're not processing any money, so that's great on your end to kind of stay out of that transaction. But are there any legality issues that you're dealing with along the way?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we try to abide by is any SEC regulations out there that have to do with raising money. So, for example, we have 180 companies on the platform right now that are fundraising, but you can only see their fundraising details if you're an accredited investor. So when you join Leafwire, you join as an accredited investor, and you have to self-certify. You either have to be part of a family office, a VC, you have to have a certain amount of assets, or if you're an individual, you have to make a certain amount of money or have a certain amount of assets, and you have to check those boxes and self-certify. Which is similar to how a platform like AngelList has done it over the years. So it's a self-certification is a recognized technique by the SEC. But we do have to be careful. We don't show all that information to non-accredited investors. So that's one of the ways. And we do obviously have some legal language we put in our emails, and that we also have in the platform, explaining that we're not endorsing any specific company. We're not approving of companies. We're not processing money. All we are is essentially like an information platform where people can learn about each other and connect. And then, we recommend that people follow the same processes they would in the real world. You exchange documents, you meet in person, you have your lawyers and accountants review all the documents, all the contracts. You follow every same safeguard you would anywhere else. We're just a place that facilitates that initial connection for people to meet, people they want to do business with or invest with.
Peter, you mentioned checking boxes at the beginning of your answer. I want to let our podcast listeners know this podcast brought to you by our friends over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. And if you haven't heard, Green Bros just announced a partnership with a killer company called Purigen to bring you the box. See, I tied it back. We were talking about boxes. This thing is amazing. It's originally developed for tissue sterilization for surgical implications, things like ACL replacements or back surgeries. They would sterilize ligaments that would be put into human bodies. Absolutely crazy. The box's remediation technology can eliminate mold or other microbial organisms in your harvest. It can also rehydrate your flour if it's become too dry, or even infuse terpenes into your flour, allowing you to create a one-of-a-kind flavor profile that is truly unique to your company, all using a patented reactive oxygen technology, meaning no harmful microwaves or radiation that can drastically harm your flour or even change the flour's DNA. You need to see this thing to believe it. Hit up Green Bros at 844-379-8746 or info@greenbros.com for more information. Or you can throw back to a couple episodes ago on the Rooted podcast. We interviewed Alan Novotny, the CEO of Purigen. Crazy interview. The guy had 20 years of medical experience. His machine and his technology was used. I got to confirm this with him, but I'm pretty sure he said that when Tiger Woods got his ACL replaced, that ACL that was used was sterilized in this machine that was being used in the medical field at the time before they moved over to cannabis. So absolutely crazy technology. We're talking with Peter Vogel, the CEO and co-founder of Leafwire. They're connecting cannabis investors or investors to cannabis, and then they'll be cannabis investors. You can check them out at leafwire.com. Again, we'll post the link in the description of the podcast below. Peter, let's get to the beans of how this works. I'm an investor. How does Leafwire work for me? Give me the user experience.
Sure. So you would come to Leafwire, you join, you select the option that says you're accredited investor. You check the boxes that explain how you are an accredited investor, if you're part of an office, if you're an individual, et cetera. And then you land on your profile. And we recommend people put in their company name and picture, just because it's more likely people will, communicate with you if you have a more personal touch to your profile. Just like on LinkedIn, the more complete you make your profile, the more successful it'll be. Then when investors click on there's a button that says Home, which is basically a news feed. And then from that point forward, every time you log in, you always land in the news feed. Think of LinkedIn, every time you log into LinkedIn, you land on the home page or the news feed. On that news feed for investors, there's always at the top, there's 3 or 4 companies with little details about their fundraising. It says their company name. I think it shows what stage they're in. Investors can click on those and learn more if they want. Or investors there's a search functionality where they can go search for companies, and they can search for companies specifically that are fundraising, and they can put in the search filters, for example, that they want companies in seed stage. They want a company that's already in market. They want a company of a certain size. They can put location in. They can even filter by how much companies are raising. So that way an investor, if they only want to invest in companies raising $1 million or more who are at Series A, which, there are those investors, they can do that. And then they don't have to waste their time looking through 50 other companies. So we've set up, I think there's about 8 different search filters that investors can use, where they can look up and see exactly what types of companies they want. And then when they see someone they're interested in, they can connect, they can send a message. And we're soon actually going to be adding, and this is going to be, I think as soon as Friday, I think it's going to be live. We're adding in a data room for entrepreneurs. And this is the first, I think, out there data room and kind of set of tools for cannabis entrepreneurs that anyone's built. So the data room is where an entrepreneur can put their pitch deck, they can put their financials, they can put NDAs, any documents they want to share with an investor. And then what the entrepreneur can do is just invite an investor, and only those investors who get invited can have access to the data room. So it makes it super convenient for an investor. Doesn't have to get a bunch of documents. They don't have to log into different sites and click on links and attachments, which these days a lot of people don't like getting due to viruses and whatnot. And what's especially cool about it for entrepreneurs is since everyone's logged in, they can then see on their data room which entrepreneurs looked at the documents and how long they looked at them for. So they can track all the activity from their entrepreneurs, all the time. And then it also functions as a CRM tool that if you invited, say, 10 entrepreneurs, you can then go invite, or you can send an email to those 10 and keep track of it all within your Leafwire platform. So that you can keep track of your communications, send an update out to 10 people at once, and it's kind of all tracked and all organized in that one place.
Peter, if we could we talk about monetization? Now, is this a free platform for investors and companies to join? And then, if you don't mind me asking, how does Leafwire make money in all of this deal?
Sure. Yeah, so we are a traditional freemium type model. Again, you can kind of think of LinkedIn. So everyone can join LinkedIn, create profiles. If you want to use the more premium features, you do start paying a monthly fee. So to provide examples of some of those, one, if you want to be a fundraising company and have a little flag that says you're fundraising and be searchable by investors, and you want access to the data room, and there's a bunch of other functionality, you would start paying a monthly fee. Another example is we're going to have what we call marketplace listings, and this is kind of like a yellow page type listings where anyone who wants to show their services and promote it to the industry can have a listing. And we're going to have, say, 50 categories. Payment processing, because we get asked about that all the time. People can't find payment processing, whether it's banks or processing credit cards for payment. Legal services. People also ask, if we know lawyers in a certain state, cannabis, people ask us for accountants who understand 180E. There's always people wanting to figure out where to advertise. So everything from advertising services to PR to security to packaging, payment processing. We're going to have about 50 categories, and we're going to have a monthly fee for people to post a listing there. So it's kind of a dual service. We know people want to promote their services, and we also know people keep asking us how to find these services. So the idea is to create this one. You can almost think about it like it's like a Craigslist for cannabis, where people can sell raw hemp if they want. People can sell cannabis domain names. It's like the one place where anything cannabis, hemp, all service providers are kind of all in one place and searchable and findable by the community.
Peter, what level does a business need to be at in order to have a real shot at getting funding through a potential Leafwire connection? Like, what are you seeing so far?
There are all different types of investors. It's more likely, and this is just industry-wide true, it's more likely that if you're seed stage or even earlier, if you're not live, if you don't have traction, if you don't have revenue, you're more likely to get funding from friends and family, or the other in the traditionally it's called the lawyers and doctors out there than you are from cannabis funds. And that's for one reason. Cannabis funds these days are typically trying to invest in Series A type rounds when companies already have traction, they already have revenue, and they're wanting to write checks of $1 to $5 million at a time. They don't want to invest $25K, $50K, $100K at a time. So if you are in that beginning stages, it's more likely you're going to get, angel investors basically, which are friends, families, doctors, lawyers, anyone with money basically, is going to be, you're more likely to be an investor. And then as you get a little bit of traction, you can start to get some of the funds. And then as you are at your Series A with, maybe you're at 25K MRR, you're profitable, maybe you've hit some milestone that in the industry makes you stand out. You're more likely to get some of the bigger funds like, our Arcadian Fund or Poseidon or the Canopy Rivers or some of those guys that are wanting to write, $1 to $5 million checks at a time versus, $100K.
Very interesting stuff. Now, you mentioned the pitch event that you guys have hosted and it helped kind of launch Leafwire. I'm interested in that. Do you have more events on the horizon? And then how does a company apply to try to take part in that event?
Yeah, for sure. So we did 7 last year. We're likely to do something similar this year as well. It's looking like the cities we're doing so far are going to be Denver, just because we're here, it's easy to do Denver, and we know a lot of the companies have been asking us to do another one. So Denver, San Francisco, which we haven't done yet, Boston, and New York, just because those are really big markets, and we have partners in all those places where we can host events. So we know at least those 4 cities. We'll probably also coordinate and do some events with some of the conferences, whether it's with the, we were the official pitch contest of New West Summit last year in Oakland. We were the official pitch contest of Cannabis in Vancouver last year as well. We may do a partnership this year with someone like NCIA at one of their events, maybe even at an MJ BizCon event. So, in places where there's naturally a lot of people already are attractive, right? Because those companies are already there. So to find out about them, we definitely have information on Leafwire. So I would say if you're interested, the best thing to do is join Leafwire. You'll get our weekly email. We always promote them there. We promote them on the platform as well. So there's usually a little static ad on there that shows where all of our events are going to be. So if you stay engaged with the Leafwire community, you will find out about them very consistently because we're always trying to promote the events.
When you look at this industry as a whole, where do you see the most opportunity for new businesses to come in and have success? I mean, you have the catbird seat in terms of going on your own platform and seeing all these companies that are trying to make it and then seeing the ones that kind of get the deals. So where do you think that opportunity lies right now?
We see a lot of companies in the ancillary space that are kind of popping up and providing all types of services and filling more and more niches that are filled in other industries but just aren't filled here yet. So you have the companies like Work, doing HR and payroll. You have the companies like Simplifya, you talked about Marion, doing, compliance and helping companies, stay in compliance with all the federal laws. The whole reason we created Leafwire was because funding's hard in cannabis. There's more ways to get funding outside of cannabis, but it's still hard in cannabis. So a lot of these companies we're seeing are just filling niches in cannabis that are filled everywhere else, but not cannabis. So even, the companies like MJ Freeway, which have been around forever. I'm sure you've either talked to Jessica Billingsley or know her, but I think she started the company 8 or 9 years ago, which is crazy that she's been running a POS type company. But you wouldn't think you need a POS company for cannabis, but you did. And there's all those holes and niches that need to be filled that are still there, that aren't going away yet.
You joined the cannabis space a year plus ago. Give me that year. What's been the biggest takeaway from working in the industry so far for you, especially compared to all your mainstream work you did before entering the cannabis space?
I would say I've been pleasantly surprised by how friendly and accepting and open everyone is in cannabis, and how you can still go reach out to, CEOs and managing directors of almost any company, and almost anyone will talk with you and, share information, and you can get access to them versus, in more established industries, you can't really do that. People have more walls up because there's so many people in the industries and they've been sold by so many people, and then it's just different. I think the cannabis industry has a little more camaraderie and a little more, I don't know if the word is togetherness, but it's in that, a lot of people in the cannabis industry fought for laws to change for years and years. So they fought side by side. They all faced, they all fought the man. And then even when the laws got passed, everyone had to kind of figure out how to comply with them. They had to learn together. They had to help each other. And then the laws change, and then everyone faces the same problems in marketing and banking and, all those things. And I think it's different when you're in an industry that is plagued by all of these regulatory challenges and problems. People have to naturally band together a little more than other industries. And I've seen that, and I've had great conversations and gotten great phone calls with, anyone else I wanted to talk to in the industry. So I've been very thankful for that.
It's interesting, and when you're saying it, I'm almost in my head comparing a single person to a parent. Like outside the industry is all single people doing whatever they want, but inside the industry, it's almost like we all have this 2-year-old, and we all look at each other like, okay, I understand your 2-year-old's crying. I've been there. Let's support each other. So that camaraderie is certainly there. Now, just a couple more questions for you, Peter. Again, the co-founder and CEO of Leafwire. You can check them out, leafwire.com. We'll mention that again before we go. Is there anything else about Leafwire we haven't mentioned so far that you think people should know that are listening to this?
We are adding some other functionality, and this is, our whole goal is to support the business of cannabis. So any parts of it that people need help with, and so one example, we are going to have a jobs board on there. So and for the same reason that not everyone wants to promote their cannabis jobs on LinkedIn, people who are looking for a cannabis job don't always know where to go. And if you end up with a cannabis job, it's probably not by accident. It's because you decided to work in the cannabis industry and you went to look for one. So one of the things we're going to be doing is providing that on Leafwire. In addition to, we'll also be adding an events module where people can, almost like an Eventbrite, where people can host events. A lot of people in cannabis like to do webinars. They like to do lunches. They like to do events. So we're going to make it so it's really easy for people to invite people in the cannabis industry, and they can use all of their Leafwire profile info to just click yes, sign up for a ticket, and then make it very easy for the promoter to then contact all those people on Leafwire, stay in touch, and continue networking. So it's not just you run an event and then everyone's gone. We want to make it so that people run an event, they're on a network, and they can still connect with each other. They can still share info, and then they're all in the same place for the next event, right? So it's just a bunch of functionality that we're adding for all the different ways that we can support the business of cannabis.
A very scalable model, I'm sure, especially, building a network. It's really just building these platforms and deciding how they all integrate together. Now, as a serial entrepreneur, what sort of advice do you give to entrepreneurs who kind of just starting out as an entrepreneur? What do you say when they come to you?
One of the things that I do say, and I try to take this advice myself, is to not to be afraid to ask for help and to admit that you don't know what you're doing. because almost there's very few people in this industry that really know exactly what they're doing. And I mean, those are the people that have been around like 10 years. Even the people that have been around like 5 years don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing. And if you were afraid to ask for help, you're going to miss out on a lot of great advice and help from people that people are happy to give you. So that's I think is one of the most valuable pieces of advice is to be humble and admit when you don't know something and ask for help.
Peter, last question before we get you out of here. What does the future look like for Leafwire? You mentioned when you started this, you were at a company that had raised $50 million and you were thinking, 5 years from now, I want to be here at Leafwire. So what does that future look like? What does that 5-year look like for Leafwire?
So I can tell you, we focused really on sketching out the 3-year kind of plan, but
normally I just do the 1-year plan. So you put 5 years into my head. So
investors usually like to see at least like what you think you're going to be doing 3 years from now. But we'll be a vibrant community of more than 100,000 people by the end of 3 years. We'll have a ton of different functionality. So everything I just mentioned to you, the jobs and events and marketplace, that's all stuff we're doing this year. So we'll be adding on all sorts of new functionality, pretty much based on demand from our members. We want to keep throwing, 10 events at least every year, keep growing, keep providing more and more ways for investors to connect with entrepreneurs. And whether that we've talked about doing kind of like lightning pitch contests online, where we have a VC online and people can pitch for 60 seconds. And whoever wins gets a meeting with that venture capitalist. And doing things where we even have like a VC office hour. So for an hour a day, we have an investor who's just on the platform, and you can go in a chat box or chat room and ask questions. So we want to keep adding more and more features, as we can. And our goal is to be the biggest and most functional, valuable B2B platform in cannabis.
His name is Peter Vogel. He's the co-founder, CEO of Leafwire. They are connecting investors to cannabis. Again, you can check them out, leafwire.com, linked in the description of the podcast below. Or if you're watching this full YouTube video, it's in the description down below as well. Peter, I say this all the time, and I certainly mean this because I think this is a really interesting platform, and I'm interested to see where you go. So hit me up if you guys have big announcements or you have, a big push that you need to get out there. Let's talk about it more on the show, and we'll get you back on here. Okay, man?
All right. Well, thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Sounds good. That's going to do it for us on the podcast this afternoon. Quick reminder to stay tuned for our show next week. Our guest will be Danny Keith, the CEO of Cannabis Club TV. We have a ton of really cool announcements in that show. In addition, we'll be announcing our next 2 huge upcoming podcasts that you'll definitely want to listen to. And we might even have a new name for that podcast series that we're launching. So that's a heck of a teaser. Make sure you're with us next week to check out the show. But that's going to do it for us on the show this afternoon. My name's been Tim Stromble, and I'll remind you one more time to work hard, be humble, and stay rooted. We'll see you next week, everybody.